Herkese günaydın. Hoş geldiniz öncelikle bugünkü webinarımıza. İsmim Yasemin Erdal. Daha önce eğitimlerimizde, daha doğrusu webinarlarımıza katılmış olanların takip edeceği gibi bu 9 seriden oluşan bir eğitim programının 4.'sü. Webinarlar aracılığıyla sizleri Avrupa Birliği'nin eski adı KOBİ aracı, yeni adı EIC Accelerator olarak geçen programı ile ilgili bilgilendirmek üzere 2-3 saatlik eğitim programları düzenliyoruz ve her eğitim programının, her webinarın ayrı bir konusu oluyor. Bu webinarlar Avrupa Birliği ve Türkiye Cumhuriyeti tarafından ortak finanse edilen ve Sanayi ve Teknoloji Bakanlığı'nın rekabetçi sektörler programı kapsamında finanse edilen Ufuk 2020'de Türkiye Fazeka adlı projesi kapsamında finanse edilen bir etkinlik. Etkinliğimiz Zoom üstünden gerçekleştiriliyor. Artık herkesin Zoom'a çok aşina olduğundan eminiz. Fakat etkinlik içerisinde biraz daha eğitimleri interaktif yapmak için Slido isimli bir yazılım da kullanıyor olacağız. Biz size sorular gönderiyor olacağız. Soru cevap şeklinde bilgi ölçümü amaçlı, renklendirme amaçlı bir yazılım. Eğer bu iki yazılımla ilgili de sorunlarınız olursa lütfen chatbox'tan mesaj atmaktan çekinmeyin. Teknik arkadaşlarımız yardımcı olmaya çalışacaklardır. Bugünkü webinarımızın konusu finansal konularla ilgili. Bildiğiniz gibi ya da bilmeyenler için bu programın başvuru dokümanları arasında finansallarla ilgili bir dokümanın olduğu, bir Excel dosyasının olduğu bir attachment dediğimiz bir ek var. Ayrıca geri teklifin içerisinde de finansal konularla ilgili bazı sorular soruyor Filargo Komisyonu teklif formatında. Maalesef bu KOBİ'lerimizin en çok zorlandığı, nasıl dolduracaklarını bilmedikleri kısım. O yüzden bununla ilgili özel bir webinar yapmaya karar verdik. Yaklaşık 2 saat sürecek. Umarım faydası olur. Sunma esnasında chatbox'tan yine sorularınızı yazabilirsiniz. Cevaplamaya çalışacağız. Ayrıca eğitimin sonunda gene soru cevap bölümü olacak. Orada da sorabilirsiniz sorularınızı. Benim görevim, projedeki görevim KOBİ aracı uzmanı olarak çalışmak. Uzun yıllar, yaklaşık 4 sene Avrupa Komisyonu'nda bu program kapsamında hakemlik yaptım. Ve gene 2014 yılından beri 500 kadar firmayla yaklaşık bu program kapsamında çalışmışlığım var. Bugünkü sunumlarımızı İngiltere'den uzmanımız Philip Sovdam, Yunanistan'dan uzmanımız ve eğitim koordinatörümüz Grigoris Hatchikostas ve TÜBİTAK'tan çok değerli arkadaşım Merve Diyar Hanım eşlik ediyor olacaklar, yapıyor olacaklar sunumları. Sunumlar İngilizce olacak eğitimler çünkü programın dili İngilizce biliyorsunuz. İngilizce bilmeyen birinin zaten programa katılması mümkün değil. Ama eğer sorularınızı Türkçe sormak isterseniz Merve Hanım ve ben bu konuda size yardımcı olabiliriz. O konuda da çekinmeyin lütfen. Yaklaşık 100 tane kayıt aldık bugünkü program için. O yüzden soruların hepsini online seans esnasında cevaplamamız mümkün olmayabilir. Ama sorularınızı chatbox'tan yazdığınız takdirde hepsinin cevapları eğitimin sonunda vereceğimiz web sitelerinde yer alacak. Oradan hepsini okuyabilirsiniz. Ayrıca tüm eğitimin kaydı da gene web sitelerinde, size vereceğimiz web sitelerinde yaklaşık bir hafta içerisinde yer almış olacak. Oradan da gene eğitimi tekrar izleyebilirsiniz. Umarım faydalı bir etkinlik olur sizler için. Sorularınızı sormaktan lütfen çekinmeyin. Bazılarınız için çok yeni olabileceği için yani her türlü soru sorabilirsiniz. Hiç önemli değil. Rahat olun lütfen. Şimdi ben sözü değerli arkadaşım Merve Hanım'a bırakıyorum. Yine etkinlik içerisinde tekrar görüşmek üzere. Umarım güzel bir etkinlik olur.
Teşekkürler Yasemin Hanım. Merhabalar, günaydın. Önce kısaca bir Türkçe giriş yapmak istedim. Bu etkinlik, bu proje boyunca ilk defa böyle bir webinar yapıyoruz finansal konularla ilişkin. 2019 yılının yazında değişti bizim programımız KOBİ aracından hızlandırıcıya evrildi. En önemli 2 değişiklik var. Bir tanesi artık fonlama kısmı değişti, biraz değişti. Yani hibe yanında bir KOBİ yatırım finansmanını da alabiliyor. Bu noktada bir sürü sorusu oluyor KOBİ'nin. Tabii programda daha pilot aşamasında olduğu için çok esnek bir yapıda. O yüzden böyle bir webinar olması gerçekten de hem 7 Ekim'deki çağrı kesin tarihine başvuracak hem de Horizon Europe'a giderken Accelerator programına ilerleyen zamanlarda başvurmayı düşünen çok faydalı olacak. İkincisi ise Yasemin Hanım'ın da bahsettiği Ek 4, yeni gelen bir şey bu da geçen seneden bu yana güncellenen şeylerden bir tanesi ve KOBİ'ler bunu doldurmakta zorlanıyorlar. Umuyorum ki bu program hem fonlanma araçları açısından hem de o eki doldurma açısından faydalı olur. Bu arada bugün etkinliğimize yeni katılanlar belki Accelerator programını bilmeyenler olabilir. Biz bu proje kapsamında oldukça fazla proje yazma eğitimleri ve kampları düzenliyoruz. Daha önce böyle bir eğitime katılmadıysanız bana mail atabilirsiniz. Ben size hem daha öncesinde yapılan eğitimlerin kaydını, sunumlarını hem de daha sonra yapılacak aynı içerikteki eğitimlerin bilgisini verebilirim. Şimdi sunuma İngilizce devam edeceğim. Good morning all once again. Before all informative presentation, I shortly inform you about who we are as TÜBİTAK National Coordination Office and what we do. I am SME Instrument. I am SME Instrument National Contact Point in TÜBİTAK. We are work with Tarık Şahin. We are also Access Risk Finance National Contact Point. Here is our email address. You can always email us. Here's our official Horizon 2020 website. You can find all information about Horizon 2020 programs and updated program calls and also online events. If you also subscribe to our website, you can easily reach all announcements and news about these events and updated information about Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. In Smart area, you can find our SME programs. Here is the SME page. You can find all documents and related updates regarding the Accelerator in here. I also strongly suggest you to subscribe to our SME page. Now we are on the way to Horizon Europe, and as I said before, Accelerate here we are running out Accelerator pilots. So we will share all updates regarding the new program, new Horizon Europe and new Accelerator program in here as we updated from European Commission side. In Who is Who session, you can easily find all national contact points regarding to thematic areas. Our mails and phones are also available. We cannot meet physically, and we are in the home office now, but we meet online according to our availability. As TÜBİTAK, we provide some financial support and awards for applicants. There are different support mechanisms for different programs. You can find all information and criteria about financial support and awards in this page. I would like to also show other calls that many people don't know. There is a page in Funding and Tenders portal, competitive calls for third parties. You can easily reach this page via this QR code. Actually, these calls are designed for institutions, organizations, but mainly for SMEs in different sectors or thematic areas. The aims of calls vary, but it's mainly about encouraging innovators for designing, developing, testing, or piloting of solutions to bring into markets. Application dates are also vary. There is not so much applications, so please take a look and apply for them. There is just one cutoff date for SME Accelerator, but there are a lot of calls in this page. Please take a look and apply for them. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope the event will be fruitful for you. Now I would like to invite SME expert in Turkey in Horizon 2020 project, Philip Sultan, to give information about Accelerator as a background for new participants. Enjoy the training.
Günaydın. Merhaba. I'm Philip Sowden, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar. Some of you may already have seen our previous webinars, and some will. So if I repeat some of the information, I'll make it short, and we'll move on to Grigori's presentation, which is the main subject of the day. So this is me, background in manufacturing. I've worked in Turkey for many years. I've worked for many years, and I'm responsible for the SME programs under the present project. I'm one of 5 key experts on the project. You've already seen Yasemin. You will see Grigoris. My other 2 colleagues, Alexander and Odysseus, deals with legal and financial and various other issues. 3 webinars so far. I mentioned this because we have recordings available on our website. Webinar 1 was a general introduction to the program. Webinar 2 looked more closely at technology readiness levels, a subject that we'll be talking about again this morning. And webinar 3 was about business planning. This is the foundation of a good bid, to have a business planning process and a strategy. All these recordings are available there. And of course, the recording of this meeting will also be on our website. Today is about accelerated financial issues, something which SMEs have difficulties with. And there will be a webinar quite soon on the 28th of September, which will be a question and answer session for companies who are submitting accelerated bids in the final cutoff on Horizon on the 7th of October. So our project has key objectives: strengthening Turkish participation in Horizon, about strengthening the capacity in the science, technology and innovation base through universities and intermediaries, other intermediaries, facilitating the partnering of Turkish organizations with European ones. And to do this, we run a range of activities, and we are in operation between the 7th of January 2019, and the project will come to a conclusion in the first quarter of 2022. Activities quite quickly: training events, which covers a whole range of things from IPR through to lobbying, project writing and so forth. Networking, this is international brokerage events, linking people together through various topics such as Green Deal and so on. The SME support, my area, which is very specifically to help SMEs, providing some one-to-one consultancy on proposal and project definition, workshops, pitching to finance, pitching to the EC, if you're lucky enough to go through to that part of the process, and investment readiness training. Finally, we have several tools to help do all that. The website, obviously. We also have a help desk. If you have any questions, put them to the help desk, you'll get an answer, and various training guides. So a quick look at Horizon 2020, and of course now we're moving towards Horizon Europe Framework Programme. Horizon 2020 was the end of the year. As I said, the last call under Accelerator is the 7th of October this year, and then Horizon Europe. And the obvious answer is technologies. The international collaborative partners, industry and academia, new markets, upcoming standards, and it amplifies the Sorry, we seem to have connection problems. There we are, back again. So 90 billion under Horizon Europe. Under Horizon 2020, we sit there.
Philip, sorry for interruption. Could you please reopen your presentation by using the share screen?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much.
I hope you can see that. Yes?
Yes, Philip, we can see.
Okay. Sorry about that. In these days of coronavirus, we have to struggle with the technology sometimes to connect with you. Okay, we were talking about the Horizon 2020, the innovation support program at 3 billion sat in the middle of 3 pillars: industrial leadership. Under Horizon Europe, you see it has a complete pillar for innovation through the European Innovation Council, the ecosystem. This shows the increasing prominence of both innovation and the SME element in Accelerator. Okay, within that, you may have seen recently the European Green Deal was announced, which it is hoped will stimulate €1 trillion of public and private sector investment. That's $1 million, a huge amount of investment. And within that, there's a great accent on science, technology, and innovation. Now, you may think we're not an environmental research company or production company, but remember, it's made up of lots of different technologies, all of which could be applicable to environmental issues. So it's worth investigating the Green Deal to see whether your project sits there. Lots of things in there, from emissions through to different farming methods, biodiversity and so forth. As I've just said at the bottom there, it will mobilize research and stimulate innovation. So worth a look. The program as a whole is aimed mainly at SMEs, which is defined as 1 to 250 employees and up to 50 million turnover. That's a huge figure, but of course it's meant to keep out something like a steelworks that may have 100 people, but a much bigger turnover than 50 million. So that's why it's there. Worth remembering how important SMEs are to every economy in the world, including Turkey. And you see there that over 90% of enterprises, nearly 80% of employment, and over half of GDP are all attributable to SMEs. Excuse me. So what about Accelerator? Accelerator is there to fill a funding gap. You may have seen this so-called Death Valley of innovation. Lots of money pumped into research on the left-hand hand of this diagram. And once it's proven or begins to be proven, then other interests come in, angel investors, venture capital, and private funding to take the idea through to commercialization. But in the gap there, you see development, the stage from research through to a commercializable idea. And the Commission reckon there's a funding gap there of 1 to 3 million euros. Under Accelerator, the Commission have pushed this line way over to the right. So they're now doing initial investment. They even are offering venture capital in the hope that it takes the idea, the innovation, through to private funding and private funding will take over to do full commercialization. So a big change there in the approach of the Commission towards funding SMEs. The story so far, nearly 6,000 companies. As we're nearing the end of Horizon, of course, they're close to the €3 billion spend. A low success rate there. Why is that? Because it's highly competitive. But remember, along the way, the process of putting a bid together means that you're better able to go to investors. It means you've done a thorough look at your idea, your innovation, your business. So it's a learning process as well as submission, and of course it will help you towards national funding or private funding. All of this is available live on the SME Instrument Accelerator Data Hub. On that website you can see how many projects Turkey has had, where they sit geographically, and track down what the projects are. So a quick look at the criteria for accelerator projects. There are 6, you see them there, and I'll go through each one. Cross-border, excuse me, cross-border has to be relevant to Europe, as you would imagine, in terms of the innovation, creating jobs, and expanding the knowledge base. And it must fit with the broader ideas of European goals. That's helping the aged population, the poor, and so forth, the wider social issues. The company must be high growth. They're difficult to define, but one measure by OECD is that the company can demonstrate growth. Excuse me, this is cold, damp weather in the UK. You can demonstrate growth at 20% a year in jobs and turnover for the 3 to 5 years. Now, this is where we begin to see Grigoris's talk coming in, where your financial data should help to show that your company is in a high growth situation, both in terms of jobs and income. Then there are 4 related criteria. The innovation must be disruptive, close to market, scalable, and at the prototype stage. And you see here mention of the technology readiness level, which you may or may not have encountered at TRL 6 or above. A quick look at what we mean by disruptive innovation. They tend to be in 3 areas: incremental innovation, the small changes that influence the market; step change, which are more significant, bringing in new technology and giving a bit of a market lead; but disruptive, which creates entirely new markets and value by disrupting the existing ones. The example I always use on this is the camera. We had the simple camera for 100 years or more, with film and lens and mechanical mechanisms. This was added to the incremental innovations of light meters and flash guns. And then we had the step change when we moved to the electronic camera, the pocket camera, no more film, uploading to your computer. But of course, finally, the disruptive innovation was the mobile phone, or mobile communication device, we should call it. None of the big camera companies saw this coming. It truly was disruptive. Sony bought into Nokia later, but none of those big companies, Agfa, Kodak, and so forth, actually saw the mobile telephony coming along. So it really was disruptive. This is a rather complicated diagram of the various technology readiness levels created by NASA for the space program. Lots of information on this on the web. It goes from idea through to full commercial application. But the area that the Commission are interested in, this close to market criterion 4, from prototype at TRL 6 through to full commercial system. I won't dwell on this because I know Grigoris will be talking about it. This idea of scalable ability to move from a final prototype to mass sales through production, licensing, joint venture, and so on. Again, Grigoris is going to cover this, so I won't dwell on it, but you have to demonstrate the project is scalable, that it can move from a prototype into a mass sales situation. And criterion 6, the minimum, again they specify, must be at the prototype stage. So this is the area they're interested in, and Grigoris will tell us more about that. In terms of awarding a project, there are three key criteria: the excellence of the project, that you've gone beyond the state of the art, the impact it will make, and arguably impact comes before excellence, but again, Grigoris will explore this, and finally how you implement the project to make it all happen. A reminder there that the presentations that we made in Project Writing Training 7, which was on the 28th of August, and the Accelerator guide are both on our website, and you can get a lot more information on this from the website. So some big policy shifts on from Horizon 20 towards Horizon Europe, much more focus on the commercial prospects of an innovation, emphasis on the impact. There are no thematic areas anymore, so completely open in terms of topic. The calls are open, but they have cut-off dates. I mentioned the last one is the 7th of October, and much more involvement in the private sector. This is the Commission wanting to spread the funding more wisely and more widely, so that the Commission's money is better spent on the area that they're really interested in, and this is the riskiest part of the project. The Commission are very strange investors compared to the commercial world, because they want to invest in the riskiest part of a project to get it to a point where the private sector become more interested. So your project must have an element of risk in order to attract their funding. EC Venture Capital, the Commission actually now have a venture capital fund which they can invest again to get over the risky part so that the private sector become more interested. And it's seen as supporting SMEs towards one last push to market readiness. The funding, I won't go into details. Grants of 70% up to 2.5 million. This is grants from the Commission, but then a tool called blended finance will take that to a much higher figure. So it's important to get this right in your application. Again, Grigoris is going to cover this. There is a phase 3, which is the coaching and mentoring of companies, and a reminder yet again that the last cutoff is the 7th of October. So assessing your technology readiness level is very important. Be honest, be truthful, and make sure you have the right level so that you can apply for the right type of finance. Applicants have to agree at the outset if they want to use blended finance. You can't change your mind before. So if you think that blended finance is an option, you have to put this in your application. And of course, if there is investment, it's subject to due diligence by the Commission and or the private sector to make sure that the figures you're giving are truthful and a reflection of the situation in your proposal. So a quick look at how we find, having visited over 100 companies in Turkey, how we find Turkish SMEs performing on the three areas I've just mentioned. In terms of excellence, a lot of national success in building the innovation capacity and some really good companies in science and technology with high growth small businesses among them. But the focus in those companies is often on getting more grants, not the end product or service. They're companies in business to get more research funding rather than to come up with a commercializable idea. There's often a poor response to what the market actually wants. There's a lot of assumptions the market will need what the company chooses to develop. And often, because the company management is from a scientific background, there's a desire to pursue the science instead of meeting a market need. In terms of impact, the Turkish market, very good for innovative products. There's a lot of scope out there. And small businesses can therefore impact nationally without taking the wider market into consideration. But that can lead to complacency, that companies do more of the same. They're often very short-sighted on what international markets are doing and want, and there can be an assumption that foreign markets are the same as national, a very wrong assumption, of course. In terms of implementation, we see some really good management teams, and we see good support from the Ministry of Technology and TÜBİTAK. But they're usually technical management teams. They're very good technically, but they have very poor skills on marketing and commercializing products. Often a lack of strategy. The company hasn't looked at the strategy over the next 5 years, and a low business experience. Strategy very important. You should always have a 5-year horizon on what your company is trying to do, and within that a 1-year plan to make that 5-year horizon happen. And of course that changes every year. It's a rolling 5-year plan. Again, more of this in our webinar, earlier webinars. Webinar 2 was about strategy and business planning. Often unrealistic finances in both directions. The Commission say sometimes companies underestimate the cost of doing something, and the figures are therefore unrealistic. Others say, you know, the figures given for the profits. I saw one project which had very limited market, mainly in Turkey, and the first year profit was supposed to be over 500 million euros. Unbelievable. I hope it happens, but unbelievable. They're unrealistic figures. So a thing that we find when it comes to proposals with the European Commission, as I said earlier, want to see that there's a need for what the company is proposing. What is the market need? What do customers want? This leads to a very strong idea, ideally a disruptive idea to meet that need, and then a solid process to make the idea into reality and realize the market. So this goes into the proposal. But what we often find is that because companies are from a research background, they're used to the research process, and they say, we're good at doing this. What sort of idea fits with our process? And often they don't really look at the need or have a very limited view of what the need is. So this can be the proposal. And of course, there's a mismatch. It's directly the opposite of what the Commission see as the right approach. So this is a big issue we find, and it's worth looking at your proposals to see if you have it the right way round. Have you expressed a strong need? Is it a good idea? Have you investigated if others are doing this? And then your process, including, of course, the finances, must be realistic. So a few key conclusions: that participation brings many benefits. It's not just about finance, it's about international partnerships and connections, knowledge of international markets. It is highly competitive. You have to be really strong in your bid to stand a chance of winning. Important to focus on the needs before the solutions. I've just mentioned that. Be more aware of the markets and the competition. Companies often say, we're going to market to Europe. Even the European Union alone, 20 odd countries, different languages, some different regulations, different buying patterns, different competition. So it's impossible really to say we're going to market to Europe. You need to be more specific. And of course, language is an issue in there as well. So be realistic about the true potential of your idea, your project, and how long it will take to be realized. And of course, a solution to this is training. It's needed to optimize the chances of success. We offer training, and we'll now move on to Grigoris, who will give us some of that training on finances. Here are our contact details, including our website, and we'd be delighted to be in contact with you. Thank you for listening. Sorry about the technical problems, and over to Grigoris.
Hello, everyone. I need to apologize, first of all, because I don't have the appropriate screen back in my computer due to some technical issue again. So, thank you very much, Philip, and the rest of the presenters before me. Before going into the topic, let me introduce myself. My name is Grigoris Hadjikostas. I'm coming from Greece, but I have 17 years of experience in EU projects in various countries, apart from my own home country, also in Serbia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, Tunisia, Poland. And of course, I'm privileged to work with this stellar team in Turkey for some time in the trainings. I've been a foot soldier of European projects in all my life. In addition to that, many years ago, when I was much slimmer and I had less white hair, I also had an academic background in finance, although I never got into financial career directly, but I always consider that knowing the financials of a project and of the way that European projects work is always a competitive advantage. Therefore, I would like to invite you in this webinar with me. Here a few things about some previous projects that I have participated, but I don't think this is the most important part. Let me show you a little bit what we're going to talk about today. There are the 6 topics that we're going to cover. The first one is related to the policy context. The policy context in conjunction with financials. We're looking at the policy context and how it influences the way that we present the main financial data of our company. Then we would discuss a little bit about the preparatory activities that we need to take in, we need to accomplish as early as possible in order to put the financial aspects of the competitive proposal together. Then we talk about a very sensitive issue, which has been introduced to the EIC Accelerator. And if you ask me, it's the essence of the reason of existence of the EIC Accelerator program. And this is the so-called non-bankability. From there, we move to the financial tables. This is supposed to be the most lengthy and possibly not the most interesting, but very essential part of the work. Sometimes financials are a little bit boring, but believe me, the details there are very important and they can make the difference in any proposal. Then we discuss a little bit the option of the blended finance, which is another innovation provided by the EIC Accelerator program. And we finish, of course, by a Q&A session. But before moving into that, I would like to introduce you to a new way of working in that case. And this new way of working is Slido. So I would like to kindly ask you to join slido.com, either with your computer or with your tablet or with your phone. And please enter this hashtag 1217. So, since I introduced myself, I believe it's fair to know a little bit more about you. So my first question has to do with the previous experience, research and development projects. I hope you can all see my screen. I would like to know if you have some experience in Horizon 2020 projects or in other EU-funded projects or in Turkish R&D projects or no previous experience at all. This is important to know so that we can adjust the content and the discussion of the presentation. Please cast your votes. I will keep it open at least with more participants to let me know. I see good background. The vast majority of you have very good experience in Turkish R&D project, which is an excellent starting point because it means that you have also developed your idea up to a certain technology readiness level. I see also some good experience in previous Horizon 2020 projects. This is not a small amount. And of course, it's great to have also newcomers because particularly the EIC Accelerator call aims at newcomers, aims for the people who are not always oriented on projects, but they're looking to push new boundaries in the market. So, okay, you can continue voting. A little bit more. I will keep it until 60 or more. Please vote. Thank you very much. Then I will pass to another question. What is your background in finance? So please let us know what is your background in finance. If you have some professional experience, some academic experience, or both, or no previous experience at all. Everything is great again? So it seems that the majority of people have no previous experience in finance, but still there is a big percentage of people who either have some academic background or they work in financial aspects. That's quite important, I think, because we are going to talk also about basic terminology. Therefore, I would like to apologize to the attendants, to my colleagues who are already experienced in finance, that some of the things they will look obvious to them, but still we will need to go through them in order to keep the consistency of the whole content. Having said that, I will and start by the policy. And the first thing to take into account when we're discussing about the policy context is what Europe is aiming with EIC Accelerator. It's aiming to create more startups, more successful companies with global scale-up potential that are based on deep tech. And first of all, what do we mean by deep tech? Because it sounds really nice and sometimes poetic, but let's see what we really mean about that. We're talking about technologies that require substantial scientific advances, and they are based on engineering innovation. Some of them that might sound buzzwords is like artificial intelligence, blockchain, biotechnology, advanced materials, robotics, photonics, electronics, quantum computing, high performance computing, whatever. All these topics are considered to be deep tech topics. And they are very, very important for the European economy because when the technology is R&D based, then we have some particular types of features. Although the time to market is longer, although the development costs of the products are higher, although that the product has a much higher risk because you need to invest lots of capital before you can have an MVP, before you can have a minimum viable product that allows you to test your assumptions in the market, still it has some significant advantages, and these are the competitive advantages that Europe has compared to the rest of the world, because then the barriers to entry for others are very high, and the knowledge spillovers are very high, meaning that such a company can create a very positive and lucrative virtuous circle with the academia, with the research, with other innovators, meaning that one deep tech company has much greater impact in the economy than one which is not based on R&D, but it's a typical digital company which can be an app to order food or an app to buy grocery and so on and so forth. Although I must admit that more and more we see the use of artificial intelligence and sometimes blockchain or some advanced other computing techniques in cases of even in commercial apps that with the first look, they don't look that much based on R&D, but there's huge technology behind. This means that we have a problem here, and this is how the policy context influences the financials. We will see it later on with non-bankability. We have the following problem. Traditionally, innovation is funded through three different sources. The first one is banks, the second one is venture capital, private equity investors, and the third one is grants. When it comes to that type of innovation, to deep tech-based innovation, banks are very conservative. Banks would like, there is an old joke that banks will lend you money only if they are 100% sure you don't need it. Then, the venture capital firms in Europe in particular, but possibly all over the world, they are sometimes facing the challenge of short-termism. They are always pushed in receiving quick returns on investments from their limited partners, from the people who invest their money on them. Plus, the majority of the venture capital firms in Europe, they have their pedigree in digital commerce, in applications, in the app economy, which is great on one hand, but on the other hand, the VCs are not trained, they're not educated possibly to understand deep tech investments. And also the deep tech investments require more patient capital and more long-term commitment, which VCs are not eager to perform. Last but not least, there is public grants. I noticed previously from the poll that the majority of the participants today have also the experience of public grants, which are great. They're possibly necessary to kickstart some things. But on one hand, the size of these grants is not enough to companies into global scale-up. And on the other hand, sometimes public grants are not as fast as the companies need. From the time that you submit an application, there are many rules to be followed. There is an evaluation procedure that sometimes takes lots of time. There are many requirements with respect to reporting, participating in meetings, etc. And it tends that the companies who are on a fast track for launching the products, sometimes they're a little bit skeptical to enter into public grant supporting schemes because they're afraid they will lose too much time and the grant size is not enough to give them the capital they need to scale up globally. Then, another very important aspect is scale. There is a problem that normally even the tickets of the VCs in Europe are quite low. So the policy context here is that we are looking for companies that will be able to scale up globally, but at the same time to have access to enough capital where they are staying, because we want to avoid what you see in the diagram. We want to avoid that a successful startup entrepreneur would pick up the plane, issue a ticket for himself or herself, go to San Francisco, raise capital in 1 year, and then all the knowledge spillovers, all the positive impact of his or her entrepreneurial activity will not stay in Turkey, will not stay in Europe, but it will go to the United States. So this is another part of the political context that is looking for companies that can scale up quickly. But speaking about scaling up, what is really scaling up? Please look a little bit at the definition there. The scalability is the company's ability to maintain or improve profit margins while sales volume increase. And there are some elements that can help us demonstrate our scalability. First of all, our business model has to be scalable. With one investment, we need to be able to attain more and more customers than we would have without. The team is a main important aspect. Substantial demand, we need to address a great market. Favorable market conditions, of course, at least for the short term. We need to know our financial needs, and also the realistic financial projection is something that the reviewers will look at it when they are somehow evaluating your scalability. The drivers of scaling, the competitive advantages you need to put forward is, first of all, a light asset base. If every time you need to grow, you need to invest again in fixed assets, then your business model might not be scalable. We had this previous example of this global markets of co-working space, WeWork, but it turned out that the business model was not scalable exactly because every time they needed to grow, they needed to rent or buy new buildings, new premises. Also, automation in processes is a main driver for scalability. Low-cost labor, inevitably, particularly in the beginning, but also in the scale-up process. And of course, the replication potential. Some business model that can be adjusted to the geographical or other realities in any country. This is a typical example of applications like Uber, for example. So, let us look the difference between growing and scaling. The difference is how much the revenues grow with respect to the cost. The point of scalability is creating more output with the same input. So, a very easy way to remember what scalability is, that scalability is your company is scalable when you get more out that you put in as you grow. Having said that, and before moving to the next topic, I would like again, if possible, to move to our poll. And here I would like to ask you, first of all, do you consider that your company is deep tech? Is it based on substantial scientific advances in high-tech engineering innovation? Let me see, numbers. It's important here to explain, and I will look deeper into this. First of all, in principle, your company needs to be deep tech, or at least there need to be some deep tech elements there that you can highlight and bring forward to make a convincing story. Let me see the numbers. Okay, the numbers are certainly seem to be encouraging. The majority of the companies in this event are deep tech, plus even the others have some important deep tech elements that they can highlight. This is quite encouraging for our participation. And let me now move to my next poll. And this is a tricky one. Do you believe that your company have a scale-up potential for global markets? Great. I like the fast pace. Also very important to target markets outside Turkey. Sometimes we can grasp a very big market share, even if we're not targeting the entire planet. But if we're targeting quite enough foreign markets, particularly the ones that we have a competitive advantage. And Turkey being an open economy and having economic relations with many other parts of the world apart from Europe, that actually might be the competitive advantage of the Turkish startups that want to win in this bid, because they might be looking to promote these competitive advantages, to explain their unfair advantage, allow me to call it, when it comes to other European competitors, meaning that they can access markets that others cannot access. So far, the results are very encouraging. Therefore, let me go back to my presentation. And here we are going to talk about the preparatory activities that we need to take into account. And first one is the team. In the heart of the preparation of financials for your proposal, the main person to consider is your accountant. Your accountant job is, first of all, to manage the entire procedure. Also, to provide all documents and fill in financial tables, to transform the sales projections that he would get from the head of sales, and we will explain the role of head of sales later, into future financial statements, to fill in the financial tables related to the project budget and to according to the strategic planning, and last but not least, to perform a final quality control on the financial data before submission. He's the most important person in the process, but he's not the only one. We have also to take into account the head of sales, whose job is to provide data about the current sales, because the current sales are an integral part of the projections structure. Also to prepare the budget about marketing, distribution, and all the aspects that are not related to development. And last but not least, to prepare a proper sales projection for the future. But can the CEO of the company afford not to be involved in the procedure? No. We always repeat in all the trainings related to EIC Accelerator, it's perfectly fine to have consultants. It's perfectly fine to engage your personnel, like your accountant, your head of sales, your marketing director, whoever in your company, to work and to be part of the team. However, the CEO needs to closely monitor the entire procedure, including the financial. First of all, when it comes to financial, he needs or she needs to ensure that the sales projection, the future financial statements are consistent with the business model that is presented in the rest of the proposal. First of all, the CEO is the person that needs to make decisions about planning the budget. Who to hire, how much to pay, what to buy, if we're going to go for subcontracting, if we're going to do marketing campaigns. These are strategic business decisions that no accountant, no consultant, no head of sales can do. And last but not least, in the context of this particular call and in the financial aspects, the CEO needs to make informed strategic decisions regarding the use of blended finance option. So, first step of preparing the ground is our team, to bring the team together. Then, we need to prepare all our documents for the past 2 years. And now I would like to ask my colleagues, the participants who are experienced in financial topics for an apology, but I will have to go a little bit to give some definitions for the rest of the participants who are not familiar with the financial part. First of all is obviously the balance sheet. The balance sheet is the first thing that people learn in economics or financial schools, which shows in the left side the assets and in the right side the liabilities. to put it the liabilities, but also the liabilities towards the owners, which is the equity. So to put it in very plain terms, in the right side, I have how I raised the money that is now circulating in the company, and in the left hand, I said what I did with this money. In a very layman terms. Then the profit and the loss account, which is like what cost I have, what I'm paying, and the revenues is what I'm earning. The difference between both is either the profit, hopefully, or the loss, very likely in the first years of any company for the year. Then we have the statement for the changes in the equity, which explains the changes caused either by income and expenses or by transactions among the shareholders or any other type of changes. Plus, very often in particular types of companies, the annual report that according to the legislation or according to the accounting standards that the company applies provides additional information about the financial performance of the company. One thing to take into account into this is that please make sure that you use accurate data. Whatever data you submit in your national authorities or whatever data you are requested to provide according to international accounting standards, and please use the right data in your proposal. That's of utmost importance, and you need to take it into account that this will be a topic that might be audited in the future, so you have to be 100% accurate. Another thing is that you understand that the workload of the accountant is already very serious, so this is some type of work that you need to perform already. Before moving to the next topic, again, I would like to take you to the polls. And here the question is one and simple. Do you have an accountant in your team? Either as an external accountant or a full-time employee doing the accountant, or you have both, or the founder is working and doing accounting. Let me see, the majority of you seem to be having an external accountant, but also having a full-time employee can be beneficial. I see some brave founders that are still keeping the accounting themselves. I tried myself in my own company, and believe me, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I will never do it again in my life. And this comes from a person who studied finance and accounting back in the days. Okay, we see we have a substantial number of participants. Okay, the majority of you is obvious that you have an external accountant. Well, the news is that your external accountant will have some workload to do. So maybe a good idea would be to discuss with him or her early on to understand what they can offer and to see if there is too much job for them. Maybe you would like to consider somehow to reimburse them one way or another, because it is going to be quite substantial work. Okay, let us go back to this one. So, next topic. And this is the reason of existence, the raison d'être, as our friends would say, about the non-bankability. This here is very much related with the relationship and the interplay between risk and potential. EIC Accelerator is looking for projects that the level of risk is high, but calculated, but also high is the potential that the project will be really successful. The purpose exactly of the EIC pilot is to decrease the level of risk so that co-investors can join in. And by co-investors, we're mostly talking about private equity funds or venture capital funds that otherwise would abstain from the particular project, either because it's too risky or because they don't understand it or because the amount of funding needed is too big for them to carry on themselves and so on. But there we have to be very careful. There are many reasons that a project can be non-bankable, and not all these reasons make it a good choice for EIC Accelerator. So there is a possibility that the project is non-bankable because it lacks attractiveness from business perspective. This project is non-bankable, of course, but that doesn't make it a good candidate for EIC Accelerator. There is a possibility that the shareholding structure of the company as it stands today is a constraint. Again, the project is non-bankable, no VC would touch it, but doesn't mean it's a good choice for an EIC accelerator. Also, the project, the shareholding structure is fine, the global potential exists, but unfortunately, the venture market has a gap. This is exactly the case we need the accelerator. This is the type of projects that the EC Accelerator is made for. So, let me try to give you an example about the business perspective. Let me start with this company. And this is a real company belonging to my childhood friend, the guy that we were best friends in the high school, and we're still great friends and we see each other together. These guys are running a company that is offering industrial automation solutions. They're great. They're full inside the technology. They're finding innovative solutions for their customers. The customers love them. They are a small company, 3 partners plus 6 employees. So in total, 9 families survive from this company. They have very loyal customers. They have very healthy company. They don't owe money to anybody. They're having enough job. They're having a very, very nice and healthy company. So technology they have, innovation they have. Are these guys bankable in the context of EIC Accelerator? No. Why? First of all, these guys, they're not really producing something themselves. They are integrators. They're getting from global players like Siemens, Mitsubishi, Fanuc, Omron, Schneider. They're getting equipment and solutions, and they are integrating them to find solutions for their customers. So, although they are in the first line of digital transformation of the economy, they're not producing anything themselves. Someone would say they are box movers. I wouldn't say that. I say they're very innovative and very relevant players, but they don't have any scale-up potential. They will remain most likely in this size for the rest of the life of the company. They don't have global ambitions. They're just serving a very, very local market with services and big resellers of the product of big multinational companies. Plus, as mentioned, they have no proprietary technology. They're just getting technologies from big players, and they're installing them, integrating them, and getting paid for service, etc. So, to sum up, this is a great company, very innovative, very much based on technology. However, they are not EIC Accelerator material. And let's see, let's try to see what would be a company that would be an EIC Accelerator material. And I will present a company that was successful in the last round just to highlight you what I'm talking about. So this company is using deep learning technology to create robotic machines that are helping fight the mosquito-borne diseases. So they're based on deep tech, artificial intelligence. They have their own patents. They have already attracted some investors in their initial steps. And of course, they're covering a huge market and they have global ambitions. These are the elements that make a company, although the company might be non-bankable, they make the company interesting for EIC Accelerator. The proprietary technology or the possibility to have some, the deep tech character, the global ambitions for the market expansion, and also if you already have some investors or there are some investors who are interested in participating, but they cannot take the burden only on themselves because the risk is too high, this is the time where EIC Accelerator comes in. This is the purpose that this initiative was designed from the first place. Let's look now at the shareholding structure. So this is also a case, a real case from Serbia. Once upon a time, there were a team in a research lab, and they did an amazing scientific breakthrough. They created a very important prototype. They also authored co-authored the paper together. But at one point, 2 guys from the team, and actually the youngest ones, saw themselves as entrepreneurs and decided to establish the company. Let's look after 2 years now. Let's look at the structure of the company. So the CEO and co-founder who established the company has 20%. The CTO and co-founder that is leading all the technical developments has another 30%. Then there were 3 researchers that they wrote together the paper, and they did all the preparatory work, the scientific work all together. and they have from 10% each. Of course, was the professor of the lab, which got 15% honorary because he was the professor and his name was first in the paper. Then there was a guy that they knew that he was a software engineer, and in the very beginning, in the first couple of years, he supported him with the initial development. He didn't ask for any money, so they felt obliged to give him also 10%. And then for the first 2 years, because they could not afford the rent, the uncle of the founder offered to host them in his premises because he had some big professional real estate space. And he also got a 5% of the equity. Is this company investable? No. The answer is clear no. Why? Because the decision-making structure is split so much, because you have the passive founders, the passive contributors, the people who just contribute at one point in the company but did not continue after all. They have the majority of the shares. Plus, these people need to be diluted from the next investors. Therefore, regardless of the potential of the company, regardless of its the value of the product, if it's deep tech, if it has a global market potential, this cap table, this shareholding structure is such that no serious investor would touch the company. So how do investors expect to see the cap table? How do investors expect to see the shareholding structure in order to be willing to invest in the company? Look at this. It's okay for the founders to have between 30 and 60, but another big percentage needs to go to the people who are working in the company on a day-to-day basis. Because unlike our previous case, where you have here people who contributed in the initial development of the technology, but now they are very busy with academic duties and they cannot work on a day-to-day basis, here you need to give shares and motivate one way or another the people who are working on a day-to-day basis in the company. Then it is very, very important that you keep aside a pool for options, the so-called option pool. This means that this needs to be also refreshed in every funding round. This means that there needs to be some equity aside for the new talent that you need to hire. Because if at one point you decide that your company needs a very experienced head of sales in the United States, and most likely you will not be able to pay the salaries that the head of sales get in the United States, you may find a compromising solution by paying a salary slightly less, but having someone with equity and with lots of stakes in the business. Another story now. Let's look at a typical case of a company that it was non-bankable because of a systematic risk in the capital market, because of a problem in the VC market structure. This is also a company that has been financed by the previous program like EIC Accelerator, the so-called SME Instrument. This company has a solid technical solution, it has a realistic business model, it has patented technology, it can provide very significant benefits for the use by reducing operating costs up to 80%. It already has sales contracts, and it's targeting for the future a huge amount. So it has all the things in place. Patented technology, ability to enter global markets, already sales contracts, very promising revenues. So why this company is not funded? From the bank side, the company would fail because they don't have real assets, the amount of real assets, real estate at this point. From the point of the VCs, it's very difficult for them to understand the company. They don't understand the fact that how the sector works. They don't understand the technology. They might be used in financing only in commerce solutions or whatever. And for the grant scheme, the problem is that the grant application might do, and then the company will lose its competitive advantage in the market. But it's also the possibility that the grant in the national schemes, they're too low for such a company. Therefore, this is the point where the non-bankability aspect comes in. So, to sum up, how can you convince the reviewers of non-bankability? First of all, highlight the elements that are needed. Deep tech, patented technology, global ambitions, strong team in place, etc. Then try to explain why the other forms of funding are not relevant for you. Also, please, please, please, please, please make sure that you demonstrate that you tried all the above, that you have spoken to venture capital finance people, that you have been with investors and stuff like that. Also, use the annexes to provide evidence. And at this point, if Philip is with us, Philip, can you hear us? I would like to invite you for a second to come on board and give us a little bit of the tricks on how can we approach corporate investors or venture capitalists or business angels and get some positive elements about our company from them.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, there we are. It's a bit of a marketing exercise, isn't it? You may be lucky enough to get people who will back your idea to the hilt, say that they're going to buy it, that it's the best thing ever, and they really hope the Commission will fund it. But those letters, those sentiments are rare at the early stages of a project. However, you may get letters from people, endorsements from people who will say how the market needs such a thing, or if it was developed, they would be incorporating it in their product, or they can see a market. Anything that doesn't actually commit them, you may find they will give you backup. A matter of talking to them, talking around them, not simply saying, this is a good idea, will you back it? But explaining the idea and its relevance and getting them enthusiastic. And obviously, the more senior the person and the more important the company, the better. So to have lots of letters from senior academics might look good from a technical perspective or scientific perspective, but if you can actually get letters from commercial organizations with serious business people behind them, which are seen as successful, then that's more important given the areas I talked about, that the Commission are looking for something commercializable, an idea that meets a market need. So that's all I would say. Work at it. Don't simply ask and stick in the bid what comes back.
Thank you very much, Philip, for your intervention. One last part from my side is the proposal asks you to explain what the impact would be if you do not receive financial support from EIC pilot. Here, the case is clear. You need to create to the reviewers the so-called fear of missing out. Please remember, the main purpose of EIC Accelerator is to stop, or at least to limit, brain drain of entrepreneurial brains, not only of scientific brains this time. It aims to stop the entrepreneurial brain drain towards the other side of the Atlantic. So, if I were you in this context, I would explain that if my company fails to attract the needed capital for its global expansion in Turkey and in Europe, inevitably we will consider moving to the United States and try our luck with investors there. I think that this is a quite critical point. Now, before going to the next part, and the next part is the financials, so get yourself ready for lots of tables and lots of such activities. Let us go again back to our polls. Let me ask you first of all, if your company has IP protected technology. This is quite an important aspect to demonstrate whether you are moving towards the right direction. Let me see how it moves. Just to clarify, it doesn't mean that if you don't have a patent, you are not eligible for EIC Accelerator. It would certainly help if you already have a patent. It is also good that if you are in the process of obtaining a patent, to explain what part of the process, and possibly you may want to consider including the patent in the eligible expenses of your proposal. But quite important, we all know that in our part of the world, there are things that cannot be patented. For example, it's very difficult outside of the United States, it's very difficult to patent software or production methodology. Therefore, sometimes the nature of our investment, the nature of our idea is such that we cannot apply patented technology. In that case, we need to certainly highlight the following. We need to highlight the fact that our company has the freedom to operate and it is not limited by other patents. Okay, I think that the majority do not have patents. It turns out we have some people who have patents, but they are, and some are in the process. It's good. Keep in mind those aspects, and then let me take you to my next question, which is related to the shareholding structure of your company. Please feel free here to provide more than the relevant answer. So please let us know if the founders, of course, have shares, if the key employees have shares, if you have passive researchers or your university or research center as such, or if you have other individuals that are involved, or if you already have investors. That's also very interesting. Let me see. I would like to see a little bit more how it works here. When you have many options, it becomes more interesting. It looks like the stock exchange table. It changes quite fast. I want to collect a little bit more data, and then I will explain. Of course, obviously, the founders need to have a good part of the shares. Also, it's important for the key employees to have a good part of the shares, and because this demonstrates their commitment. Now, it's great if you already have investors. That's an amazing signal. In the case of passive researchers, others, relatives, or the university, or whoever else has a share, it's good to explain how this can be beneficial to the company. Generally speaking, they don't want to see that a big part of the shares of the company belongs to people who have no interest of seeing the company growing or who have no active role in the company, because this becomes a burden. This becomes a burden for the EIC Accelerator and a burden for the future investors as well. But I think that the picture is not bad the way it looks right now. Thank you very much.
Grigoris?
Yes, please.
May I ask you a question on behalf of the participants? Because
absolutely, of course.
I get very often, and I'd like to hear your opinion. If a company it's a startup, it has a high growth potential, and it's applying to EIC Accelerator, but it's also in touch with some big VCs, and the negotiations are going positive, not concluded though. And it has even in touch with some potential customers. So there's a promising picture. Do you think they should declare it as it is in terms of non-bankability issue?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is, if you ask me, if the company has the possibility to demonstrate not even the sales, but even some preliminary agreement about the sales or some agreement about some pilot project that would lead to future sales. Plus, if the company has, as Philip mentioned before, if the company has some ongoing discussion with the VCs, this is exactly the signals that the reviewers are expecting to see.
Yeah, but what about the terms of bankability issue?
But normally what happens is the following. The VCs would be much more willing to finance a company that is already talking with VCs, because the point is the following. A VC would like to see some grant inside, because the EIC grant is, technically speaking, maximizing the value of the equity investment of the VC, while at the same time it's reducing the risk for him. So the suggestion is to put the best paper, the strongest paper in this case, in my opinion, if we're talking about the papers, if you have a good relationship with your VC, they can give you a conditional commitment. What is the conditional commitment? That we are planning to invest in this company, providing that they will get the EIC grant. For me, this is a way to win the game. But from your experience, Yasemin, when we have from the Turkish companies that have been successful in the SME Instrument and now the EIC Accelerator, what were their previous relationship with VCs? Did they attract VCs before they won the grant, during the grant implementation, or after?
Actually, some of them didn't. They were really startup, and they were really quite risky, high-tech products. So they didn't have any prior contact with the VCs. But some of them were already in touch with the leading VCs. They got some letter of commitments from the VCs, as you recommended, a conditional one. And some of them had already received a VC investment of up to 2-3 million USD. So I don't think there's actually some specific rule, but it depends on the product, it depends on the potential of the company. But in most of them, the most important and the most common denominator was the team. The team was very experienced in the sector, and they had good network, they had good communication with the important stakeholders. So I think the team was the decisive factor in most of the Turkish companies that received the EIC Accelerator.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you very much. I think that after that, it's time for us to move a little bit to the next part. And this is the financials, which might not look the most exciting part of the presentation for the time being, but I hope it will be useful for you and particularly for the people who have no previous financial background. So again, my colleagues who have background in please excuse me, I need to explain a little bit some basic terminology. For example, assets are the property rights and other sources which are financially under company's control and which are results from past events. Assets, in a way, are expected to generate profit or financial returns for the company in the future. So, for example, an asset is the building and the equipment that I have to do my business so it will bring me money. And these are fixed assets. These are assets that stay there. Then you have some other type of assets, which are the invoices I have issued and I'm expecting to be paid by my customers. These are also assets because this is actually a promise for making money in the future. Now, on the opposite side, liabilities are current obligations resulting from past events. So, a liability is a bank loan. A liability is some money I owe to my vendors. But also, somehow, there is the net equity, which is stays in the side of the liability, and this is the value of the company, the remaining assets once the liabilities have been deducted. And this, at the beginning, it includes the contributions of the owners, but it also includes, as we move along, the results of every year. If those sound superficial, let us go a little bit on the table so that we become a little bit more concrete. But before going to that, let's see a little bit another important financial term, the break-even point. As we said, we have variable costs and fixed costs, and these are the total costs, and then we have revenues. The fixed cost, for example, is the rent that we have to pay for our premises. The variable costs are costs that are changing according to the volume of sales. If we sell 100 units of our product, we need this cost per unit. And then we have the revenues, which are also growing related to the volume of sales, obviously. So the break-even point is technically the point that we stop losing money from running a business. It's the point where our revenues are equal to our total costs, meaning the variable and the fixed cost. Believe me, the break-even point is the most important possible point in the lifetime of the company, because it's technically the time where we start making money from now on. So, when we're going to the financial table, we need to look at in two important aspects. One has to do with the past and the future financial performance of our company per se. The other aspect has to do with the project budget. The financial performance is technically the tables, the Excel file in Annex 4, while the project budget is presented in section 3 in the subsection which is called resources to be committed. In this section, we're going to address both of those. And we need to have into account that we need an estimation of the total financial resources. And we also have to understand the timing of the financial needs in order to reach the break-even point. So the financial tables requested are the simplified financial information on revenues, expenditures, cash flow, and balance sheets, the up-to-date data related to cash and debt, the summary information about the company financial history, the company ownership and capital structure. You remember the examples previously. This is particularly important for the applicants that are going to the blended finance option. And of course, the information about the current financing round. Let us go quickly through the tables one by one to see what they are, what we can see there, and what will be the topics that we need to take into account. So you see here a typical case with the financial statements. They're asking you to go 2 years back. They're asking you to have the reference year and explain which one is this. And then they're asking you projections for the upcoming 5 to 6 years. And here, you're supposed to talk about your profit and loss statements. They're coming from the accountant for the previous year, but together with the accountant and the head of sales, you need to do the projections for the future. Same goes for the cash flows. The cash flows are the money that are going in or out in the company. And same goes for the balance sheet. The balance sheet, as we discussed, is the picture of the company with respect to assets, liabilities, and the net equity. So, also from this, there are some indices to be calculated. One question that we normally get is how our projections should look like. And the answer is you need to keep a balance between ambition and realistic projections. Of course, here we are looking about ambitious projects that have a scale-up potential in the global market. But as Philip mentioned before, if you mention that you're going to have 50 million euros profit in the first couple of years, that might not be really realistic. So we need to be careful to show ambition, to show bold projections and bold view for the future, but also based on realistic assumptions and based on things that are achievable. Philip, if you are with us, have you seen example of realistic and non-realistic and ambitious and non-ambitious cases in all the companies that you have been mentoring in Turkey?
Yeah, sorry, there we are. It tends to be something that people want to leave to one side. As I said, a lot of the company management are scientific and science excites them and research is what they're about. And all of this financial stuff is a bit of a nuisance. I'm an engineer myself, and I've done battle in various companies at various levels, including chief executive, with accountants. Accountants, I hope there are not many accountants online. It's said that accountants are people who go around the battlefield after the battle and shoot the wounded. Accountants will always hold you back. But realism is what you're after. And to understand whether it's realistic, you need a grasp of accounts, not leave it to someone else, but to understand what's there. I think sort of 3 years is the minimum, really, in getting realism about accounts. If you're a startup, I'd expect to lose money in the first year. The second year, you're very lucky if you break even. Of course, all of this depends on the economic climate. So perhaps lose money the first year, break even the second year, and make a tiny profit in the third. And I think that's being realistic. But to go from zero to millions of euros of profit in 1 year, it might happen, but it's not likely. The likeliest is a slower progression. And I think the Commission are far happier to see a steady progression into profit than something that's unrealistic. Remember, all of these evaluators are business people. They're not bureaucrats, they're business people. They've been through it too, and they know what the world is like when it comes to startup and running a business. Back to you, Grigoris.
Great, thank you very much.
Something, Grigoris.
Sorry, yes, Amin. Yes, please do.
While they are filling this table, this question is asked many times, and is this year. For example, if you are applying in October, and is 2020. And so you have to make your assumptions based on this. And while filling this table, you have to explain your assumptions very well in the main 30 pages proposal document. Because in that proposal template, you have to explain your business model. You have to explain your revenue model. You have to give numbers on your potential market. on the total available market, on the market that you are planning to size. So when you make these assumptions, you put numbers here, you have to relate all these numbers to your assumptions in the main document. And in order to be convincing about these numbers and your assumptions, you have to be really specific, and you have to provide accurate information on the market, on your customers, on your financials, about product like pricing, how much product you are planning to sell, the unit selling price, the unit cost of producing that product. So a very, very good assumption shall be made before filling this table. The future years shouldn't be made by the accountant of the company. You have to take your existing and past figures from your accountant, but starting from N+1, you have to fill it yourself based on your financial assumptions.
Thank you very much, Yasemin. And another question that I very often get, and possibly you have also experienced, is like, what if we don't have profits yet? And always my answer in this case is, it's perfectly fine not to have profits now. I mean, the majority of companies who have profits, they are bankable by some typical financial institution. It's nevertheless quite important to demonstrate some profits towards the end of your projection, towards the last years of your projection, because eventually it will look good and it will make sense. You would agree with me that after some investment from private investors, from grants, from bootstrapping on your own, then at one point you need to have profit. So if you would ask me how my financials should look like, I would say it's perfectly fine not to have profit in the first couple of years of the future. But then at one point, in particular towards the end of your projections, you should be able to demonstrate very strong profit. Another question that I get is, what if I have no sales yet? And that's a trickier one. Of course, it's always a matter of the sector. If you are doing very, very large-scale technological projects that have to do with governments or have to do with the medical sector, etc., you might need to be able to invest many years because you have your first sales contract. But I would say that if I was a reviewer, I would certainly prefer to see companies that at least have some sales, they have some invoices, or they have some contracts of getting invoices, or they have some good MOUs with strong customers to get some invoices, because zero sales in the past and zero sales currently might create for me I would say, I wouldn't feel so secure. I would make me feel nervous on whether the people in this company really know how to sell. And from the successful companies in Turkey so far, Yasemin, how many had already sales?
Actually, the ones I know, they were mostly startups, and I can say that maybe half of them had very little sales. And their sales were mostly from doing projects, not from a product, but from doing projects for the bigger companies. And the most recent company which received these grants from Turkey was established by a medical doctor, and it was a medical product, and it didn't have any sales at all, you know.
Great, thank you very much. So the answer is a little bit of sales would always help. You don't expect to show huge sales, by the way, but nevertheless, it's good to have some. Let me go to the next table, and this is the company up-to-date financial data. How much cash you have now on your account, and how much you burn per month, either as a fact of operating expenses or as a fact of previous debt. It's very important here that your runaway is at least 9 to 12 months, meaning how much money you are spending. Otherwise, the reviewers will think, would this company exist at the end of the valuation process? So it's very important to structure your runaway time in a way that creates to the reviewers the security that you will exist in the upcoming months, which is very important and which is also very tricky for startups. The recent evidence demonstrates that many startups, they have enough cash for the next 3 or 4 months and not more than that. Here is about the financial history, meaning if you have raised equity, if you have debt, if you have convertible loan, if you have previous grants, and you are expected to say when you obtained it, who provided you the finance, if it was public or private, what is the amount, and how is the valuation now if it's relevant as we speak. Also, it's good here in the comments to explain, to give more accurate details. And please, if you have grants from national initiatives, as most of you mentioned in the poll, please make sure to explicitly mention them, and in the comments explain how the results of this grant program is helping you to develop the technologies now. It's very important. It's considered already, like, allow me to use the term, as a seal of excellence, as a badge of excellence, showing that you have already and you have a solution up to some technology readiness level that is mature enough for the purpose of this call. Then here, it's about the capital structure. I think I have made a very extensive example before. Here, it's very important to explain who are these people, if it's the founders, the management team, friends and family, business angels, family offices, venture capital, corporate investors, whatever. It's very important. Also, if you have some stock option plan, which I strongly encourage you to have, please mention it here. And this is another table that needs to be filled. Particularly, this table is needed only if you are going for blended finance. But keep in mind that the criterion on whether the company has a proper capital structure or ownership table is quite important, even in the cases of reviewing the company without the blended finance. So make sure that you have a proper financing structure there. Now, here is about the current financing round. This is about, again, if you are raising equity, it's about the amount requested and what is the suggested post-money valuation. What means post-money valuation? Is the estimated worth of the company after the outside financing and capital injection are added to the balance sheet. How much the company would value, book value we're talking about now, after the new cash is injected. Now, let's go a little bit to dig into the financials of the project per se, meaning the financials of the requested amount. So, as you see, Horizon 2020 has different types of actions, and each one has its own financing rules up to a point. Here in the IC Accelerator, which is the previously known SME Instrument, it's a single entity grant up to 70%. It follows all the technicalities and the modalities of the innovation actions, meaning that the funding is 70% of eligible costs, and there is an indirect eligible costs up to 25% flat rate. Which, what do we mean by flat rate? It means that you don't need to use invoices to support it. A few things that my colleague Odysseas Spyroglu, who is not with us today, is always pointing out is that the grant is not the lottery. You will have to contribute by 30%, and all the way to get the money is by presenting costs. And these costs need to be actual, real cost. You are reimbursed based on real cost, not on estimation. They should be borne by your own company and not by a third party. They should happen during the project duration. They should be already estimated and foreseen in the budget. They need to be identifiable and verifiable. Of course, they have to be in compliance with your national tax system, with your national labor legislation, with your national social security regulations. And last but not least, and most important of all, they have to be reasonable and justified. If you can convince yourself about the reasonability of a cost, then every auditor, every reviewer, every third party will agree also. If the cost is directly related to this particular action, if the cost is directly related to what you have written in the proposal, then the cost will be reasonable and justified. So let's see a little bit eligible and ineligible costs. Eligible costs are the personnel cost, and by personnel cost, we mean the full personnel cost, the ones that are also including the employer's cost for social security, etc. The travel costs, the equipment, but only the depreciation of equipment, unless we have cases where the equipment is depreciated in 1 year. the goods, works, and services, the subcontracting, and of course the overhead, the indirect cost. What is not eligible? This is the deductible VAT. These are the losses due to fluctuation of exchange rates. This is something that you need to take into account. This is the interest that you may generate, but also provisions for future losses of debts. These are costs that will not be considered as eligible by any means through a Horizon 2020 project, including EIC Accelerator. Now, this is how a table from a typical project from SME Instrument would look like. Here you see the requested information per work package, you see the eligible expenses, you see the indirect cost, you see the total budget, and also the requested DC contribution. The difference between the requested DC contribution and the total budget of the project is the own contribution of the company. It's the co-financing that is requested by the founders in order to deliver the project. So please remember that the grant, EIC Accelerator grant, is not a lottery ticket. You also need to contribute with your own resources, but you also need to deliver exactly what you have promised. Then, if the total sum for travel, equipment, and goods and services is above 15% of the total personnel costs, you need to fill in this table explaining in detail the travel, equipment, and other goods and services. My suggestion is, if you have space in your proposal, to fill in the table anyways, regardless of the percentage of personnel costs and other costs, because in this way you can demonstrate that you have very well thought about your costs. Now, with respect to subcontracting and third parties, generally speaking, don't subcontract too much, but please, if you are planning to give subcontracts, describe and justify the tasks that will be subcontracted, and try to convince the reviewers that you are applying measures for best value for money principle. The taxpayers' money that you are getting here, you should be treated as your money. So you need to explain how do you apply this value for money principle. Are you getting some money? Are you getting some offers? Are you getting some, you have a previous subcontractors that you are using this, you have selected them through different criteria in the past, and you are working with them. You have to explain how you are complying with the best value for money principle. Also remember, please remember that your subcontracting should not be disproportionate of the total estimated cost. If you say that you have a project of 1 million and 800K will be go to subcontracting, this is already a lost case. Then you have the concept of the linked third party, which is an affiliated legal entity that can work with you. An example of a linked third party, for example, if your company has headquarters in Istanbul, but it has a subsidiary company in Berlin, this company in Berlin is a linked third party, and you have to take this into account. Or then when we are talking about the contribution in kind that are provided by third parties, might be a third party that is seconding personnel or giving some resource to the beneficiary without this being their economic activity. Generally speaking, my suggestion is, if it's not absolutely necessary, try to avoid third parties. In the case of EIC Accelerator project, that creates unnecessary complications that you might not need. Again, Yasemin, what's your experience? Did Turkish participants have big amounts of subcontracting and budget to third parties? What happened for the successful proposals?
If it is a medical product, yes, because they have to work with a clinical research organization and they have to subcontract this. So it's, I think, totally okay. But if it is not a medical company, I will personally, as an ex-evaluator, not recommend using a subcontractor.
Great. Thank
and
you
sometimes the applicant is confused about what is subcontracting and what's not. For example, if you are working with a patent attorney, or if you are working with a lawyer, or if you are working with a social media company as a consultant, it's not considered as subcontracting because you can always get support from outside suppliers, some small amount, like up to 50,000 euro, I think. But subcontracting is you really allocate an important part of your task to another company. This is subcontracting. For example, you have a product which includes software and hardware, and you just allocate the hardware part to another third company. It's subcontracting because it is related to the main part of the product. But if you are getting some consultancy support from a lawyer or from a law company or from a marketing company, it's not considered subcontracting. I think they don't need to specify it as subcontracting because there's a evaluation question regarding the subcontracting issue, and it is a bit risky to use subcontractors. So if not necessary, I wouldn't recommend it much.
Thank you very much. I would say I'm on the same page with you on that. Let us move now. Let's see a little bit what are the direct personnel costs. This is the employee costs or equivalent, because sometimes you have someone who is directly employed to you, or you have natural persons who are working under a direct contract, meaning you have a person who is a freelancer, let's say, but he's hired or she's hired by you in the course of some kind of contract as an internal consultant to work for you in the specific project. Also, the SME owners that are not receiving a salary, they are also eligible to be reimbursed, meaning that if you are bootstrapping your company and you're somehow living from your savings or from your family resources, then you can charge money into the project without really receiving it yourself. This is a very specific clause that I'm encouraging you to look for examples in our help desk, or to read the particular topic in the annotated model grant agreement, that SME owners that are not receiving a salary, still their time can reimburse to the company through timesheets. Then we have travel costs, and this is pretty much obvious. This is about transportation. This is already in your proposal. You need to identify the number of trips, the destination, the duration of travel, how many people are attending, etc. But it's also important to remember that in case you have some policy in your company that says that for trips we are reimbursing every day with 200 euros, and then the person is responsible to book his hotel, to eat, to do whatever. This is okay if it is somehow documented as being your usual practice on travel. Which means that in that case, it might be beneficial for you if you want to act like that. There are two ways. For example, in my company, I'm asking the people to collect the invoices, and we reimburse them on the basis of the invoices. In a previous organization that I used to work in an institute, they were giving us a daily allowance of money. And then you can choose either to go to spend it in a restaurant, or to go in McDonald's and eat cheaper and keep the money aside, or to go in a very expensive restaurant and put money from your pocket. But in any case, if you want to give the flat rate, a flat subsistence allowance, you have to document it in some kind of policy internally in your company. The equipment is very tricky, and it's very tricky in the context of EIC Accelerator particularly, because very often you need the scientific or technological equipment to move forward. It's very tricky because it has very specific rules that vary from national to national legislation, and the Horizon 2020 is reimbursing the depreciation and not the full cost. For example, if an item has an economic life of 4 years, and this means that the value after 4 years will be 0, this means that you are losing 25% of its value every year. So you can charge the full cost only if the project lasts for 4 years. But if the project lasts for 2 years, you can technically charge half of the cost. And in that case, you will be reimbursed in the 70% of the half of the cost. So when you're making decisions about equipment, be very careful about the depreciation, and always advise, get advice from your accountant on how the depreciation would look like according to your national legislation. Then, other costs, as very wisely Yasemin mentioned before, there might be like short consultancies, or a lawyer, or specialized digital marketing agency or activities like that, but also more plain activities like the catering in a project meeting or printing of some leaflets, etc. These are considered other costs. Some of them can go to subcontracting indeed, but my suggestion is when we're talking about subcontracting, as Yasemin said, is like cutting a piece of the main job and giving it to another company to do it, to put it in very plain terms. When you are getting some service that is not part of the activities of the project, main activities of the project, or does not fit into your company's profile, it's obvious that this one will be in the other cost. So if you have an invoice from a designer that is designing the logo of your company, etc., this would go to the other costs. In any case, all the other costs need to be detailed and justified not for as part of a company's expenses, but also justified for the purpose of this particular project. And that's important to remember. Again, with the subcontracting, the suggestion is avoid or go to small amount, take into account business condition, and also please look at the examples that might exist in our website. Now, with respect to indirect costs, this is flat, 25%, and they don't need to be justified. However, keep in mind that these costs are not free money again. These are supposed to be connected to productive personnel, and in order to cover the cost for office, for maintaining the office, for utilities, for communication, etc. Which is very, very important because, for example, if you have a company that does not have physical premises and you have the company registered in your home and the people who are working for you are also working from home, there is a very, very big possibility that the auditors will reject all your indirect costs. So the indirect costs, although you don't need to justify them in the course of invoices and other documents, please remember that they have to make sense. These are connected to the productive personnel. They aim to pay all the utilities, space, rent, and other activities that are necessary operating expenses for the personnel to be there and do the job. And that's the idea. That's how it's good to remember them as such. Now, keep in mind that there is a term called budget flexibility. This means that we are living in a very dynamic environment. Small businesses are constantly changing their strategy to adjust to the landscape due to their small but also flexible size, and this is supposed to be their competitive advantage. But this means that very often, when we're running a project in EIC Accelerator, the reporting costs may be different from the ones we have estimated in the budget. This is why that there are budget transfers that are allowed between beneficiaries, which is not the case for you because you are a single beneficiary project, but also between budget categories without amendment. The amendment is needed only if a very significant change in the planned work is requested. Meaning, if there is a significant change, you change the work package, or you change some activities, or you change some deliverables. If you had, for example, 50K in travel costs and 40K in let's say other costs, and in reality you have 40 and 50, so you change this. This is a minor change that you justify in your report, but you don't require an amendment to go through. Possibly the most important aspect of budget is the planning. It's very important to start on time, to cover all the cost items, as we said quite a few times, to have realistic estimations. And also, once you have all the figures in place, you get an approval from your CEO on whether these projections, these numbers are consistent with the overall business model of the company. Wrong assumptions will certainly lead to problems, and always poor planning creates uncertainty. We have a link there for a practical example of how to prepare budget in our website. Please feel free to visit it and see how it works there. And before moving to the next topic, again, I would like to ask you to allow me to ask you a couple of questions to see where we're standing. So, an important question. Does your company have sales now? even small ones? Or if you don't have sales, do you maybe have some signed contracts that prove that you will have sales in the future? Let me see, I will wait a little bit more. Okay, good that some of the people have contracts. Okay, great. It seems that the majority of people do have some sales, or at least they have some signed contracts, but still there is almost 1/3 of the participants that they don't have sales yet. And my other question for you, which aims to demonstrate how well prepared you are, have you already prepared the budget for your project? Do you know how much it will cost you to do your investments? Wow, amazing readiness to begin with. And we go a little bit down. Some people have already done some preliminary research. That's also very much needed. It seems that about 1/4 of the people, or about 1/5 of the people, do not have a budget yet, but most of you are already finished it, or you are still working on it. I would also consider this as an encouraging result. And I will use this to go to my next topic, which is related to blended finance. Blended finance is exactly the idea of the Commission to put also some equity funds together with a grant in order to help you scale up faster, providing that you will need it, of course. So here is the case. The grant, the EIC grant, is supposed to finance activities from technology readiness level 6, as we noticed together with Philip earlier, to technology readiness level 8. Activities above technology readiness level 8 will be financed only through blended finance. Practically, we're talking about activities which are standing at 9. And these are the money that is needed to support investments in equity or other repayable funds like convertible loans or whatever, in order to bridge the innovation activities with effective market deployment, aiming finally at the scaling up. And this has been quite tricky for me to distinguish between that. Keep in mind, the follow amount that the maximum amount that you can get for equity investment is 15 million euros, although the average ticket from the Commission is stated to be around 5 million euros. Before going to examples, let me give you a quick reminder. You have seen this from Philip previously, this type of diagram. But you see, in the 6, 7, and 8 technology readiness levels, we are talking practically for EIC Accelerator grant. But when we have some fully commercial application and it's the time to scale up, and this becomes an integral part of your project, then you need to opt for blended finance. And let us try to provide some examples. So the grant, as you know, which is up to technology readiness level 8, might be between 500,000 to 2.5 million. While the equity needs to be up to 15 million euros, or the average rate is expected from 500 to 5 million euros. Let me try to illustrate a couple of examples here. So let's suppose that you're having some idea that is mostly related to a scalable software platform. This platform, you need, in the course of the project, you need to validate it with end users, which is technology readiness level 6 activity. And for this, you need to use grant as a source, and this might cost you around 300K. Then you might need to invest a lot of money in fine-tuning the user experience and user interface, particularly if you are aiming at global markets, particularly if you are aiming at adaptive user experience based on the profile of the user. And this might be very costly, but it's still technology readiness level 8. So again, you will go to get it funded from the grant. Last but not least, once everything is in place, you need to establish a global presence. You need to establish offices in a few major cities in the United States and in many cities in the Latin American continent. These activities, establishing the offices to promote an already commercial product, is technology readiness level 9. This is supposed to be covered by the blended finance, and the total amount would be around 3 million euros. Let's use another example. Let's suppose that you have a more like brick and mortar investment, that you are developing some new nanomaterial that has a very good impact in some sector of the economy. Of course, you will need to validate your production process, an activity from level 6, which is eligible, and the source will be the grant, around 600K. Then, once you are close to the final product, you need to define the exact specifications of the end product and possibly the whole portfolio of products that might be even more complicated. And for this case, you would need to invest around 250K. But last but not least, let's suppose that everything is great, that your product is validated, and in that case, you would need to build large-scale facilities to produce. This cannot be covered by the grant. For this purpose, if this activity is connected, you miss even a very big ticket, 8 million euros, let's say, although it's quite unusual, but still it's possible, through the blended finance scheme. Having that said, Yasemin, what do you think? What is your way of distinguishing on whether an activity needs to go to be funded by the grant or needs to be funded by the blended finance? I mean, the technology readiness level typology is very useful, but if you have some more layman's approach, some more distinctive way of distinguishing between the two.
I think the examples you gave were quite explanatory. For example, if the company is looking for establishing a facility for serial production, you know, if they are looking for some finance to improve their facilities, or if they are looking for some marketing tools to increase the visibility of the product in the international markets, I think this should go to blended finance. If the activity is too much sales focused and too much marketing focused, I think this should go to blended finance. But if the company is asking for some money to go to some customers, meet them and get their requirements about the product, and to use those information for the development of the product, this should go to the grant. So if the purpose of the activity is sales oriented, it should be blended. But if the purpose of the activity is to get some information, further information to improve the product and to bring it to the final stage, then it should go to the grant.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
But I know some proposals, for example, it also depends from the evaluator to evaluator, Grigoris, unfortunately. Sometimes I've seen some very, very sales-oriented activities. The company asked for the grant and the evaluator said it's okay. But sometimes the company is asking for some money to really improve the product, and they say it's not eligible for grant, and they are recommending blended finance. So there may be some difference from the perspective of the evaluator as well. But to be on the safe side, I wouldn't write very marketing and sales focused activities under the grants.
Thank you very much, Yasemin. Indeed, I think that, as you said, unfortunately, in all these cases, the subjective element is very evident. The evaluators can look at it in a different way. And there are no bold red lines between the technology readiness level and technology readiness 9. This lean startup methodology that I'm a big advocate of and requires that you're constantly communicating and getting feedback of the customer while developing your product might lead you in many aspects like that. Let me move on to the next slide. And these are the parts that you will need to explain in your proposal if the blended finance is requested. So, one thing is that you have to explain how the equity component will be used for and how much part of your company you are ready to share with the investors. Then you would need to explain how the valuation of your company has developed over time, what is the rationale behind it, and what are the relevant metrics and milestones achieved from start to present. Then, of course, as we said, there are some particular tables related to the company ownership and capital structure that you have to explain. And the most important thing, all investors or equity investors, they have one thing in their mind. And these are the very simple 4 letters talking about exit. And this is a good form of exit because it's the time that you cash out your money from the investment and the investors are cashing out their money of the investment. They're making the return and they're moving on to next investment. Speaking of good and bad types of exit, Philip, what is your opinion about the blended finance and how would you compare it with the funding scheme of Innovate UK, where they're also involving private equity financing, but in a slightly different way? How would you compare those two, and what do you see the positive and the negative things?
I think it, sorry, you should see me on screen. There we are. First of all, I think, you know, there's an awful lot of information out there which can serve to complicate as well as to simplify. I think when it comes to the investors, the EU like risk. They want risk. They put money into risk. Private sector do not want risk. They don't put money into risk. They want a return. And I think that's the dividing line between the two. If your project has an element of risk that will enable it to become commercializable and profitable, that's where the Commission come in. And even though this through that one last hurdle and into commercial products. So far as the UK scheme is concerned, again, a heavy focus on commercial, but more funding over a longer time, but with a very keen selection process. So they look for winners to begin with and then back them more, rather than, as the Commission has to do, take in a wider audience and back them to a smaller amount. So the difference is in, as I say, focusing more on winners and then putting more money gambling on winners, that being the difference. But I think with the Commission funding, just think of the risky part versus the venture capital part, the commercial part. I saw a chemical company who had a really good idea for an industrial treatment, but needed to scale up. They had gone through laboratory tests, they'd gone through all sorts of things, and they needed to build a prototype plant. And this is where the Commission and blended finance came in to help build that test plant. So again, Commission getting us over the risk. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Yes, yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, the last topic with respect to the blended finance is the procedure, because let's suppose that you submit your proposal, you have opted for blended finance, and then you go in the position where your proposal is accepted as a grant. So the grant is given to you. You have the go decision. What happens next for your blended finance part of the money? First of all, there will be a pre-due diligence. They will be checking your integrity and reputation. They would look if you have a criminal record. They will look at the previous project you have delivered. They also might start discussing with you. Then, if those remain green lights, and if there is no FBI or, I don't know, Europol warrant against you, then most likely you will be invited into a due diligence, which is an in-depth check of the team, of the structure, of the documents, of the IPR, of the financials. This is really a very detailed process. Those of us that have been in due diligence in the past know it's nothing like the evaluation procedure. It's much more, the due diligence is done by people who love to look at the details, and they are extremely experienced in asking all the difficult questions. So don't even think of trying to mislead them. It makes no sense. The people who are doing due diligence in private equity investments are really trained for this job. At the same time, the EIC fund, which is a financial organization financed by the European Commission, but acts like a private fund, they will do a market test and they will see for co-investors. As you know, venture capitalists, or you may not know, venture capitalists are always looking to syndicate for many reasons. To attract all the money that is needed in one pool, to diversify the risk, to pull together all the resources and all the contacts they have. But also, VCs are much more eager to bet on a horse that somebody else is also betting on. Therefore, the IC fund, during this process, they will also try to test the market for additional co-investors. And then, if they make the first decision, they will have to issue a proposal addressed to the EIC Fund Investment Committee, where they recommend whether to invest on you or not. Then, if the EIC Fund Investment Committee gives a green light, what happens is that you enter into legal negotiations about the contractual agreements, about the various terms and this and that. There, what you need to do is to hire an experienced lawyer, a lawyer who knows how to deal with private equity investments. The typical you have, and he helps you with your heritage issues, might not be the right person for that. And then the last but not least, once the final agreement is concluded, it will be presented to the board of directors of the EIC fund that will make the final decision and they will sign the agreement. So if you're going for blended finance, it's good to know upfront that there is a heavy procedure ahead.
May I add something
yes,
here?
Of course.
While if the company is applying for blended finance, I think they have to really well prepare their financial documents, and they have to be really clear and honest about their explanations, because if the company goes through a due diligence and if the EC finds out that there were false claims in the proposal, and they may even lose the chance of the grant. So there is such risk.
Thank you very much, Yasemin. Now, before going to the Q&A session, I would like to invite you for a few more questions. So, will you need technology readiness level activities in the 2 upcoming years? And by technology readiness level activities, as we have already defined, we mean technologies, activities that are aiming directly for sales and not for optimizing the product or optimizing the business model or testing the market, etc. Okay, let me see. I think the majority of you will say yes into that. Let me give you a little bit more time. And now, since 64% of you claim that you will go for technology readiness level activities, the other question is, will you opt for blended finance in your proposal? Let me see if the numbers add up.
Oh.
You see that this is disproportionate, and this is, I think that this is an interesting point for discussion, Yasemin and Philip, for all of us, that maybe this is although that people will need the type of funding that blended finance offers, they would prefer possibly to go on their own, or they would prefer to somehow look for other resources. Just to clarify something here, even if you opt for blended finance, but at the end of the procedure, you decide that you have better offers from other investors, the European Commission will not kill the grant part of your application. On the contrary, they have no problem on that. As they mentioned in the FAQ section of the blended finance, they see themselves as a friendly investor. They're aiming to help in case other investors are not ready to put money. If there is a private investor that is ready to put money, they have no problem from abstaining and giving the floor to them. What is for sure is that if you don't opt for blended finance in the development of your proposal, you will not be able to claim it afterwards. So that's maybe a point to think about. Now, going back to the PowerPoint. This is the time where we are having the Q&A session. And if possible, for this Q&A session, I would like to ask Yasemin to help in the moderation and to see which of the questions are questions that need to be answered by Philip or myself in English. Possibly there will be some questions in Turkish. So, Yasemin, is it okay to give you a little bit the floor, the moderation, to run this Q&A session, and then I have another 2 questions in my poll before we finish that I would like to ask.
Sure. Actually, I answered most of them. Shall I repeat them? Because there are just one more question left.
I think the ideal would be, yes, if people have some other questions or if there are some questions for us.
There is one more question, but I didn't really understand. Eğer isterseniz Türkçe'de sorabilirsiniz soruları. Çünkü bazılarını anlamakta zorluk çekebiliyorum. Gözde'nin Hanım, sizin sorunuzu anlayamadım.
I think it might be you know, if they can be in any way grouped together.
Sorry?
Are they mainly about, you know, a particular topic, or are they just random questions?
Random, but most of them were covered by Grigoris actually during his presentation. There are some new questions, we can go through them. I just need some time to read. Okay, a question in Turkish is, how do you evaluate the technology readiness level? Is there a demo required? This is a question. This is not about finance, but I think we can explain. The criteria for application to this program is that the initial criteria, it has to be at TRL 6, technology readiness level 6, which means that you should have a working prototype. So you have to convince the evaluators that you have a working prototype. If it is a software, you can claim that you have the beta version of your software, and you can give some information about the users and user feedback on the beta version, closed or open. And if it is not a software, but it's a hardware, then you can give details on where you tested your product, in which potential customer, what type of results you got, and is it working, is it meeting the requirements of the customers. So you have to explain it in detail. How did you come to the prototype level? How did the idea started then? Which steps you have gone through? You have to give some specific information to be convincing that your TRL is at 6. And if we admit in the proposal that we will cover our expenses for the 30% project contribution, as well as for TRL 9 and phase 3 activities with our own resources, and with some credits from banks, is it against non-bankability? No, I don't think so. You can claim that you will find, you can claim that, for example, you have already in touch with some potential private VCs, and you can say that you are not applying for the blended finance option, but you will evaluate other private VCs, and you can get some such conditional letter of commitment from VCs as Grigoris recommended. Or you can say that you have the enough cash flow to fund the remaining 30% of the project. So it doesn't mean that you are against non-bankability. You don't have to apply for blended finance if you don't want to.
This point came up about the reluctance to blended finance and so on. Quite often in a business, somebody has created a product, it becomes their baby. They don't want anyone else to have that baby. They just want the money. In the real world, that's not possible. And Yasmin and I have seen companies where they've developed a really good product, and you say, well, what are you going to do with it? They say, we're going to build a factory. They know nothing about manufacture. They don't have several million to build a factory, and they've not looked at the options of how to recover their profit from their invention. That might be partnership, licensing, or even selling the idea or their business. You have to be open about it, and indeed open about flexible finance. If they're frightened of it, scared to have people in, it shows that they're not on a firm financial footing in the first place. They should be sure of their finances before they go in for any grant.
Okay. Can we budget employee housing? Employee housing, I think you mean recruiting employees, yes. You can either use the salary of your own staff, or you can get, you can work with external freelancers, consultants, and you can cover it under personal cost. You need to recruit employees overseas and would like to provide housing for them. What do you mean by housing? Like accommodation or recruiting them? If you are asking whether it is possible to recruit international employees, yes, it's possible, and you can include it in the budget. For example, you have some target countries, potential markets for yourself, and you need to get some support from European employees. You can use them, yes. It's pay their rent? No. You can't use the budget for paying the rent. Grigoris, maybe you can answer this question. What is the usual exit strategy in EIC fund investments?
That's a good question, because technically speaking, the EIC fund has just started, so we haven't seen the exits yet. But I'll give you the example of because I'm following very much this market of investment, startup exits, etc. The capital markets in Europe, with the exception possibly of UK and Germany, are not very big. So, and they're mostly not trained, and not the capital markets themselves, they're not trained to receive IPOs from high-tech companies and from highly innovative companies. That's why the majority of the companies in Europe, they choose, if they go public, if they go towards an IPO, most of the times they are going through these two stock exchange markets, either London or Frankfurt. But, and that's important, the majority of exits in companies nowadays does not happen through IPOs. This is something from the textbooks when I studied finance many years ago. Nowadays, the majority of the exits happen through acquisitions, meaning that there will be bigger companies. For example, in the startup scenes that I'm following in Serbia and Greece and Bulgaria, all the exits happened when a very big company came and acquired the SME, which is the target, the startup, which is the target. And this is how we expect that the EIC fund will most of the times cash out its investment. With some exceptions, which will be bright exceptions, but still exceptions, of companies that will go public. But this is not the thing that you will see in the majority of the cases.
Okay. There are a couple of questions regarding the relevant topics accepted by the SME. There is no relevant topic. This program is totally bottom-up, so you can apply with your product. You don't have to relate it to some topic. And I think that is one of the important issues, that why it's so popular, because you don't have to find a suitable call, or you don't have to find a relevant topic. But the criteria is that you should have a globally disruptive product at the prototype level. What is important is the global innovation level of your product. So you can work with any topic as you wish. One of the participants has a recommendation regarding the expected co-funding by the participants. He is recommending that this 30% is too much for an SME, and it should be decreased. Unfortunately, we are not from the European Commission, so we don't have this power to change and decrease these rates. We are just here to inform you, so we can't do anything about it, unfortunately. As a scale-up startup, can we propose to open sales office in a new country? Can we include this cost in the financial plans? Actually, Grigoris explained this in detail. In the blended finance, you can of course ask for some blended finance to open sales office in a new country, but you have to give some shares and get some VC funding. I mean, you have to apply for blended finance, because it means that the activity you are proposing is a TRL9 activity, which can't be funded by the grant. So yes, you can include it in your financial plans, but you have to go for blended finance to fund your sales office in a new country. One more question regarding the change in the budget. Do you have any room in amending the budget after submission? Yes, it's actually quite flexible compared to national grants. If you are planning to make some, the only thing you can't do is you can't increase your budget. For example, if your proposal was accepted with 1 million euro your contribution, you can't go over this amount. But if you don't use the money within the scope of your project, for example, if you made all your expenses and it was 800,000 euro, you just get what you spent. So you can't go over your budget. But in the budget items, there is room for shifts. If this shift is up to, I would say, 15%, you don't even need an amendment in your contract. You just state your request to your project officer in the EU that you would like to make some shifts within your budget items, and they normally accept this. But if you are asking for a big change in the budget items, around 30% or some amount, similar amount, then it's a big change, I would say. Maybe Grigoris would make another comment. Then they would ask for an amendment in the contract. It's also possible, but it just makes the process longer.
Yes, and always keep in mind the people the people who are in the commission, your project officer, the people that are taking care of your budget, they need also to be covered. They need to have if they have to make the choice, will they take it through a lengthy procedure, or will they keep it as it is? They will always prefer to take it through a lengthy procedure because it's the nature of their business. They want to maintain that the procedure is bulletproof.
Thank you. And one more question. Are construction expenses of building a production plant covered? Construction expenses are not eligible for the grant part, but for the blended finance, yes, you can ask for this, right, Grigoris?
Yes, correct. Generally speaking, construction of premises for building, etc., is most of the times avoided in Horizon 2020. That's exactly why the blended finance part exists, because you might actually need them.
One more question. We have a company running in Turkey, but we have an innovation and want to install a small production site in Germany. Can we apply for blended finance for German investment? And can we give equity only from the German operation? Because this new product will be sold to automotive OEMs in Germany. So if you are applying as a Turkish company, the grant and the blended finance should be paid to your company in Turkey. But you can use this money in Germany or in any other country if it is related to your marketing and sales plan. So the money should be spent from the Turkish company, but you can use it and spend it anywhere. Any more comments, maybe? Philip Grigoris?
I think that if I was an investor, I would like to have a share of the money that of the company that I'm putting my money in, and the one who is more profitable. So I think the investor would look at which is the main structure.
I think I can see the number of questions increasing and the amount of time left decreasing. So we ought to limit it, I think, to another 3 questions. We're keeping people online past our deadline. But to remind people that these questions and answers will be available on our website, and the line will stay open for questions. So they will be answered, but perhaps not live.
So if there is no more question, I think...
I would like to run a couple of poll questions, final ones, if it's possible. Yeah. Very quick ones that are summarizing, hopefully, what we discussed today. So, first of all of us, I think we want to thank you for your participation. A couple of last 2 questions. After attending this seminar, do you believe that your company is suitable for the IC Accelerator grant? I would like to see a few answers here. Really happy on the positive answers. Let me see a few more. Okay. It seems that we have the right audience. But keep in mind that even if you realize that your company is not suitable for the AAC Accelerator grant, it's also a positive outcome because this is a very demanding proposal. It requires time, effort, and expertise, and it's good once you come to realize whether you are the right company for that purpose or not. Let me see a few more questions, and then I will go to the last one. A few people answering possibly. Okay, I think that the vibe is clear, and we're all a little bit tired. So let me take you to the last one, which is relevant. Are you planning to apply in this call in the last cut-off date, since your company is relevant?
Awesome.
Great. Okay, I think we're going to have lots of applications from Turkey in this round. And I think that I will, this more or less, let me keep it for another couple of seconds to see if we get new votes. So, if not, I will give back the floor to you, Yasemin, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can we put this screen with the poll, evaluation poll, you guys?
Yes, of course, we can put it. Give me 1 second again. Here
To
it is.
evaluate the program, the link.
You mean the screen with the link for evaluation? I think that this is, Kemal, can you help us with that?
Yes, of course, Grigoris, I'm sharing now.
Okay, let me stop sharing mine then.
Okay, thank you, Kemal. So I'm making the closing speech. If speakers don't have anything to add, you guys, please, Merve Hanım. Sanırım yok. O zaman bugünkü etkinliğimizi kapatabiliriz. Öncelikle katıldığınız için çok teşekkür ediyoruz hepinize. Umarım faydalı olmuştur. Finansallar aslında en çok soru aldığımız konulardan biri olduğu için webinarda yer vermeye çalıştık. Biliyorsunuz bir sonraki başvuru 7 Ekim'de. Aslında bu mevcut program Horizon 2020'nin son başvurusu 7 Ekim'deki. Önümüzdeki sene itibariyle ve yeni başlayacak programın en üst cut-off tarihlerini bilmiyoruz. Programda yapılacak değişiklikleri de bilmiyoruz. O yüzden şu anda onlarla ilgili bir bilgi paylaşamıyoruz maalesef. %80 kadar katılımcı, yani katılımcıların %80'i 7 Ekim'de başvurmayı düşündüğünü belirtti. Bu bizim için, eminim ki TÜBİTAK için de çok güzel bir haber oldu. Umarım hepiniz başvurursunuz. Bir sonraki webinarımız 28 Eylül'de, yanlış hatırlamıyorsam bakayım. Evet, 28 Eylül'de. 28 Eylül'de deadline'a, yani cut-off'a çok yakın tuttuk ki amacımız şuydu aslında. O zamana kadar tekliflerinizi, bu proposal dediğimiz teklif dokümanlarını ve Excel'leri hazırlamış olursanız eğer, o eğitimde birebir aslında soru cevap üstünden gitmeyi ve hani son başvurudan önce aklınıza takılan noktaları ve küçük ipuçlarını size paylaşmayı hedefliyoruz. Yine TÜBİTAK'ın web sitesinden ve bizim proje web sitemizden kayıt yapabilirsiniz. Duyuruları paylaşıyor olacağız. Bugünkü eğitim sunumları ve kayıtları hepsi bizim web sitemizde ve TÜBİTAK web sitesinde yer alıyor. Alacak daha doğrusu önümüzdeki günlerde. Tekrar edeyim. Projemizin web sitesi www.turkeyinh2020.eu. TÜBİTAK web sitesi de
www.tubitak2020.org.tr
e2020.org.tr. Dediğim gibi tüm etkinliklerle ilgili kayıtlara, webinar kayıtlarına ve sunumlara ulaşabilirsiniz. Katıldığınız için çok teşekkür ederim. Bir yarım saat daha bu platform, Zoom platformu açık kalacak. Bu chatbox'tan sorularınızı yazarsanız eğer saat 1'e kadar yazmaya devam edebilirsiniz. Onların cevaplarını da gene web sitemizden paylaşıyor olacağız. En son sizden ricamız bu ekranda gördüğünüz QR kodu okutarak bugünkü eğitimi değerlendirmeniz. Bu bizim için gerçekten çok önemli çünkü bu online eğitimlerin ve webinarların devamı gelecek ve sizlerden aldığımız feedbackler doğrultusunda iyileştirmeyi ve gerekli değişiklikleri yapmayı öngörüyoruz. O yüzden bunu doldurmanız bizim için çok önemli. Tekrar katıldığınız için çok teşekkür ediyorum. Kendi adıma ve tüm arkadaşlarım adına. Bir sonraki webinarda tekrar görüşmek üzere. Hoşçakalın.
Hoşça kalın. Katıldığınız için çok teşekkürler.